Bob Larson is the world's foremost authority on the occult, demons, and the supernatural. You've seen him on Larry King Live, The O'Reilly Factor, Politically Incorrect, Oprah, and other network programs. He has traveled to 80 countries and has written 30 best-selling books, translated into a dozen languages. Today, you'll discover how to overcome spiritual bondage and become the person God meant you to be. Now, prepare yourself to receive spiritual freedom.
So let's take a look, first of all, at the issue of mental illness. And anybody who's going to minister to the hurting, you are going to have people come to you with various mental health issues. What are some clues to discovering whether or not it's the chicken or the egg, whether or not it's the devil or the mind? If it's true mental illness, there are some things, I think, that are very obvious and will clue you in to that possibility. Now, that's not to say that if the person is mentally ill, that dismisses the possibility of demonization. But we're just going to begin by looking at the issue of mental illness. One of the first things is family history. We always ask that in our profiles for our coaching clients. Is there a family history of mental illness? Now, of course, we realize that can mean a generational curse. But it also can mean that there's something congenital, that it is being passed on, that the inclination toward various forms of neuroses, psychoses, whatever it is inherited through the family line. That does lend some legitimacy to the fact that it is biochemical, hormonal, that there is something physiologically and psychologically taking place which is passed on from generation to generation. Now, we'll get into this in a moment. It also may indicate a curse, that there's a generational issue from a spiritual standpoint, too, as well. I think the second thing is, has there been some institutionalization as a result of a legitimate professional diagnosis? When people come to me, and I know that they have spent some time in treatment and that they have been committed for some length as the result of a legitimate professional diagnosis, I tend to approach it a little more cautiously in terms of whether or not there is demonization. Now, that's assuming that that professional diagnosis is legitimate and that the person is qualified and they have genuinely tried to determine the mental state of the individual. Now, we all know and have all seen instances in which someone has been psychiatrically classified, institutionalized, and there wasn't a thing wrong with them. It was demons. And you get the demons out, and they're perfectly normal. And I've seen those cases. However, keep in mind that when there is institutionalization and when there is diagnosis that says they are mentally ill, you need to, from a deliverance standpoint, approach that with caution. And I say this to folks who are involved in our Do What Jesus Did teams. We never want to be at odds legally or professionally with the mental health community. You can get yourself in a whole lot of hot water that way. So let's be very cautious about what we do. Now, you may suspect a bad diagnosis. And let's face it, there are some lazy clinicians out there who are all too ready to just write a prescription because they don't want to take the time to work with the person, as we do, to get to the wounding. And you all know that that can't necessarily be worked into a 50-minute $300 or $400 or $500 session. All right? Some psychiatrists will charge up to $1,000 or more an hour for 50 minutes worth of your time simply to pump you through full of pills. And they're just lazy. And we know that happens. We've all seen that. But we also have to get the benefit of the doubt that there are some good clinicians out there who sincerely will try to do a good job. The other thing is the symptoms. Are the symptoms consistent? When they are, that's more of an indication that it's mental illness. Now, I'm speaking from experience. I repeat, I'm not a clinician. I'm just talking about what I have experienced with exorcism and deliverance. When the symptoms are almost always there and there is very little lucidity, the person is basically out of touch with reality more than they are in touch with reality. That tends to indicate it's mental illness. When it's demonization, it's more the effect of the demon causing them to have aberrations psychologically, but on a periodic basis. When there is periodicity, that seems to indicate demonization. Now, an excellent example of that is King Saul. He was just fine most of the time until this evil spirit would come upon him, and then he would go into fits of depression, or we'd actually today call him bipolar. Well, you know, if King Saul showed up at a psychiatrist's office today, they'd probably given him Zoloft and say he's bipolar. The Bible tells us that he had an evil spirit. And he was okay as long as that evil spirit wasn't upon him. And why was the evil spirit upon him? Because he rebelled against God. He went to the witch of Endor. He sought spiritualism. And in the same vein, people in our culture today get into the New Age, into the occult. They become demonized, and then they exhibit traits of mental illness. But you will find they're in and out of it. When they stay in it, that's more of an indication it's not so much demonic. Now, I feel like I need to give a disclaimer with almost every statement that I make here. Because you're going to find exceptions to all these rules. I'm painting with a broad brushstroke here. I'm giving you general guidelines, knowing that in my own experience, I have seen actual case studies that contradict almost every single one of these. The other thing that's rather interesting is to what extent there is a preoccupation with religion, or the mental aberration expresses itself, for example, with thoughts of blasphemy, religious preoccupations, things which are very anti-God in nature. Now, the person might have a religious psychosis. And there are people who are psychotic, who are religiously psychotic. You know, they don't think they're Napoleon, they think they're God. Or they hear God talk to them. Some of you have those folks in your church. Just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. You know, they're the people who walk up to you all the time and say, "The Lord has spoken to me and he has a word for you." Well, yeah, okay. I just talked to him this morning and he did have a word for me, but you know, if you're welcome to share it, but I'm not sure I'll place a lot of credibility. Does God sometimes speak to a brother or sister in Christ and have a word? Absolutely. Does God sometimes speak to a pastor with a word? Absolutely. But you know what? You can usually tell by the life and the consistency and the level of spirituality of the person who's coming to you whether or not they're truly in touch with God and whether you should be in a position to receive that word. Same point with a pastor or a Christian leader. You just don't run around from one person to another looking for words from God. Sometimes these people have religious psychosis. They think they're talking to God. They think they're hearing from God. Some actually believe they hear the voice of God. Now, I don't doubt that God could audibly speak to some people. I have known people who have heard the voice of God, and I believe what they tell me. But it's extremely rare. When it happens with a lot of frequency, generally that's a religious psychosis. So, if the person has a religious preoccupation, that tends to make me think that it may not be demonic. that it could, it could be demonic. I'm sorry. If it's a religious occupation, I tend to think it is more demonic. Because normally, a psychotic person does not have religious preoccupation unless they have religious psychosis. All right? The other thing is the tendency toward violence and abuse. Now, does mental illness cause people to be violent? Yes. Does mental illness cause people to be abusive? Yes. But generally when I see that, I tend to think it is more demonic. Particularly if it's related to some trauma or abuse issue which they have experienced. Mentally ill people who are violent and abusive don't always necessarily have a life history of violence and abuse. When they have a life history of violence and abuse, then I tend to think it's more demonic. Because they're demonized as the result of the trauma, and this is the way the demonization expresses itself. All right? We have some very serious people looking at me this morning. So what do we conclude out of that? What are the possibilities here? Don't get confused. Because there are at least 5 possibilities when somebody comes to you and you're trying to figure out, is it mental illness or is it the devil? The first possibility is that they are mentally ill. And there are no demons. That's it. They're just mentally ill. It's their hormones, their biochemistry, something they've inherited. The brain is just misfiring. It doesn't work. Now, that's a diagnosis that a lot of people in the Christian community are uncomfortable with. And the Christian community is not up to speed in accepting the reality of mental illness just as we accept the reality of physical illness. I assume most people in this room would not say to everyone who has diabetes, you have a demon. Now, there are some who would, and that gives deliverance a bad name. Everything's a demon. Everything's not a demon. Not every sickness is a demon. Every sickness is from the devil. God's not the author of sickness and suffering and disease, but it's not necessarily the result of, and I hate using the word, but demonic possession. Sometimes you just get sick. The body malfunctions. Sometimes you don't treat your body right. And your body suffers because you've been bad to your body. Sometimes you've been bad to your mind. And the mind goes bad. And the devil, yes, may have tangentially played a role. He may have been directly involved, indirectly involved. But you're still mentally ill, and you don't need an exorcism. You legitimately need treatment. Then there is, we'll abbreviate, mental illness that is caused by a demon. It's not hereditary. It's not biochemical. A demon caused the person to go crazy. Many people in mental institutions today qualify. They are there because demons drove them crazy. And if you could work with them, it wouldn't do you much good because the demon is likely not there. He's gone. He did his dirty work and he left. Why hang around somebody who's mentally ill if they're going to consistently stay out of touch with reality in some psychosis when you can give that demon to somebody else to make them crazy? So there are demons in mental institutions, but not a lot. Sometimes there are just crazy people who are crazy because the demon drove them crazy. And then he left them. I run into that all the time. Now, there's a third category, and that's the person is mentally ill because they have a demon of mental illness, a demon of insanity. And I've certainly dealt with many cases like that. And I have seen people walk into our meetings crazy. I mean, off the wall. Cast the demon out of them, and they're totally changed. The mental illness is gone. Now, they have some other issues. And there are some folks here with me who saw a remarkable case of this last spring. We had a woman come to our meetings. She had been through all types of therapy and psychiatrists. And the Lord led me to go pray for her. And she would just, she was crazy. And they remember seeing her. She would flop around and flail her hair, and her hands would do weird things. And her eyes would roll, and she'd just go crazy on you. She had a spirit of insanity. When we cast out that spirit of insanity, she was totally changed. Walked out of that room with clarity of thought and mind and was restored to herself. In fact, her husband called the office the very next day, shared a very generous gift with the ministry. He said, I just want to bless your ministry because you did more for my wife in one night than all the psychiatrists have done all these years. Now, this woman still has some issues. She came back to another one of our conferences recently to be ministered to. She has some demonization. She has some severe psychological issues which are not resolved yet. But the insanity, this crazy flailing about, and this erratic, weird behavior that almost caused her to be locked up is gone. That's gone. The demon of insanity was cast out. Now, she has other issues because the demon of insanity got in there because of the other issues. Now the other issues have to be healed and resolved, but she's not crazy anymore. All right? So, some people are strictly mentally ill. Some people have mental illness caused by a demon. Some people are not mentally ill. They have a demon. And some people are, don't get confused here, combinations. They have both. They truly, biochemically, physiologically, are mentally ill. They also have demons. Which came first? You don't always know. Sometimes they were mentally ill, and the demon saw an opportunity, seized it, and they became demonized because they were highly vulnerable. They were, in a way, defenseless because of the mental aberrations. In other cases, they became demonized. And the demon created legitimate mental illness. Just like with physical illness, we see this many, many times. And when you interrogate the demon, we've had this happen over and over. The people who have traveled with me have seen this. When you interrogate the demon, is the person really sick? Yes. They really do have this disease. Well, how did they get the disease? Well, I gave it to them. So is it a demon? No, now they really have a disease, but the demon gave them the disease. Simple. We had a man come into one of our meetings, fascinating. He walked in on a cane, could barely move. The Lord sent me to him to pray for him. Wild exorcism. Powerful demons. When the demon manifested, just spontaneous, without thinking, I just reached over and I kicked the cane away. And it just stood there. I said, you don't need that, do you? He said, no, I don't need it. He needs it, but I don't. So for the rest of the exorcism, he didn't need a cane. Now, mind you, this guy could not stand. could not move without having his cane. But when the demon was manifesting, he didn't need the cane. I've also seen this many times with people who have visual disorders. Saw this recently with a woman who could not see without glasses. But when the demon was manifesting, he said, get these glasses off. Man, I can't see a thing with these on. So the demon would, you always tell when the demon's manifesting because he would take the glasses off. Because the glasses bugged him, kept him from being able to see because his eyesight was normal. I'm going to go in the exorcism optometry business. And right after that, into the weight loss business. All sorts of new opportunities for funding the ministry are out there. I'm kidding. Let me finish my point here and I'll get to you. So, when the exorcism was over with and the man came, well, what happened was when the demons came out at me, he hit the floor. I mean, boom. We had television cameras. The media was there that night and caught the whole thing. Secular media. I mean, and then he got up off the floor and stood up, and he's got this glow in his face, and he's testifying. I said to him, aren't you missing something? He said, what? I said, your cane. And he said, oh, my God, I don't have my cane. Where's my cane? And he's standing there without his cane. He's fine. He walks out. He was back the next day, no cane, perfectly healed. Now, I asked the demon. I interrogated the demon. Now, we're not looking for extraneous information when we interrogate demons. We all know that. But we are looking for critical information to know what we have to know related to the person's deliverance. And I interrogated the demon during the deliverance process, and I asked this question. Because this man had had 7 major back surgeries to try and correct his problem. I said, how did the man get to be this way? He said, we made him this way. He was fine until we got a hold of him. We just messed up his back. I said, well, does he have real back problems now? Oh, yeah, he's got real problems now. Because we made him believe he had back problems. To follow the process. We made him believe he had back problems. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And because he believed he had back problems, he developed back problems. So this is what I'm getting at. When I talk about the combination, sometimes demons implant thoughts into the mind of physical or mental illnesses, and then you can actually get that physical or mental illness. I see Idra nodding her head back here. You guys run into that, haven't you? So then they have a legitimate disease that needs treatment now. But they didn't used to have a legitimate disease. The demon gave them disease. So now you got 2 challenges. Because now you can get rid of the demon and the disease doesn't go away because they still have the disease. They got to be physically healed. As opposed to number 3, where for example, the mental illness is the result of the demon. You get rid of the demon, the person's fine. But sometimes the demon causes the mental illness. And you get rid of the demon, but now the person really has mental illness. I'm definitely trying not to confuse you. But I confess that this is a little complicated. Now, there's a 5th possibility, and this is what we were talking about with King Saul a moment ago. Okay, you have demons with periods of insanity. That's the periodicity factor. The demons come and go. When the demons aren't there, the person is not mentally ill. There's no indication that anything is wrong with the mind. When the demons are there, and depression is a typical one, because this is partially what Saul had. The person can be terribly depressed when the demon is there. The demon's not there, and they're fine. Or we call them bipolar. I mean, they're here, they're there, they're all over the place. When the demon's there, this is the way they are. When the demon's not there, they're totally different. And we'll get into bipolar in a minute, because the demon can be either manic or depressive. There are demons of aggression or mania, and there are demons of depression. We'll get into that in a moment. So you understand, this is complicated. Now, for some people, especially folks who do deliverance, they don't want to deal with this. Praise God, in the name of Jesus, you've got the power. I'm going to lay hands on you, and it's going to be gone in the name of Jesus. Go! That's my Southern evangelist imitation. And it goes in the name of Jesus. And it comes right back before the keys are in the ignition of the car in the parking lot. Why? Because none of this stuff has been dealt with. People want it cheap, quick, easy, simple. Now, I want our Do What Jesus Did teams to know, and a lot of you are members of our teams, this can get complicated. And the devil knows that. And if you just want to be force-fed something easy, quick, and simple, look for another ministry to be involved with. Because we're not going to do it that way. And that's the reason the secular press puts its cameras on this ministry, because they know we've got credibility. They've heard the teachings, they understand where we're coming from, and they know that we're willing to acknowledge a wide range of issues. Everything isn't a demon. A lot of things are a demon, and more things than most Christians realize are demons, but everything isn't, and it's off. The devil is much more clever. He gets it all mixed up. And if you try to go in and solve it on a simple, out in the name of Jesus basis, you're not understanding the strategy of the devil. So when someone comes to you and there's some indication of a mental problem, take a deep breath, stand back, don't go charging into it, rebuking and commanding. Get a little more history from the person. Ask some more questions so that when you get into it, you have a better documentation basis to operate from. And also, this is why talking to the demons is important. See, the people who say, you don't have to talk to them. Just tell them to go, and they go. You don't have to talk to demons. They haven't got anything to say that we want to know. Oh, yes, they do. They have a lot to say that we want to know. We don't dialogue with demons. We interrogate demons. Why do we interrogate demons? Because of these complexities. And many times you can force the demon, once you get them in a defensive posture, under spiritual pressure, under penalty of the Holy Spirit, to tell you what went on. And that is very healing, because in the post-deliverance process, then you know how to get that person restored, and in the aftercare, how to bring about recovery. Let me continue with the teaching here. I've had a number of questions, and normally I say, please feel free to interrupt me, but I'm going to ask you to hold those for a couple of minutes, because I want to make sure I can get through all this deep stuff, and then we'll come back. Jot your questions down as we're going along, because a lot of you, I see, have questions. Jot them down, make a little note there, and then we'll come back, and then we'll answer all the questions. Still with me so far? All right, great. Now, this is not the, shall we say, the more sensational part of the teaching, but I really believe this may be one of the most important sessions we have of this entire institute, because if you can get this and get a grasp on this, it'll really help you to minister to people effectively. And quite honestly, there's not a lot of places you're going to go to get this kind of teaching. So we need to get it right here and right now. Now, let's talk about various forms of mental illness and some of the conditions that you're going to run into. I just cannot. My brain's not in gear this morning. Schizophrenia, okay? That's the biggie. That's the one you're going to run into most of all. Jekyll and Hyde, two personalities. The person is split down the middle. One thing 1 minute, the next thing the next. We're not going to go into a highly technical description of schizophrenia, but we all, I think, have a general working definition of what that is. Now, when someone comes to me and says they are schizophrenic, or often a family member brings someone and says, would you please pray for my son, my daughter, whoever, they've been diagnosed as schizophrenic, would you cast the demons out of them? I take a deep breath, I step back, and I say, well, I don't know if I'll cast the demons out of them. They may not have demons. Now, you know what reaction you're going to run into? They're going to get mad. They're going to get upset. because they've determined in advance this thing is the devil. And if you try to get real complex with them, like we just talked about, they don't like it. And sometimes I really tick people off because they want that quick, simple answer. And there are plenty of other people out there in the Christian community who will tell them if somebody's schizophrenic, it's demonic. And so they've come to believe that. You tell them otherwise, they don't want to hear that. And I can understand why they don't want to, because schizophrenia is a very emotionally taxing thing to deal with if you have a family member who is schizophrenic. Okay? How many of you saw A Beautiful Mind? Okay? Actually, even though Hollywood changed a lot of the truth and the reality, it did show you the depth of how that psychotic condition can manufacture amazing truth to the person who in their inner mind perceives things which are not there. And how they can be brilliant on one hand and just completely out there on the other hand. All right, schizophrenia. A couple of things to note about that. First of all, drugs. Do drugs help? You've been taking your lithium lately? Good. Keep taking it. Do not, and I speak to our Do What Jesus Did team people, do not, never tell somebody to stop their medication. You are not a clinician. You are not a professional. And you could send that person off the edge. Because the only thing that may be keeping them in touch with reality is the medication. You tell them to stop it, you've got a basket case and a lawsuit on your hands. And you probably deserve it if you give that kind of advice that you don't know how to give. Now, sometimes the mental illness is demonically caused, but there are sufficient natural symptoms that can be treated by the drugs. When people say to me they are under treatment by drugs, I generally tend to believe then, out of those 5 factors we said a moment ago, that is true mental illness. Drugs don't control demons. Drugs don't control demons. Now, drugs may control the symptoms that demons manufacture, but they don't control the demons. I really am doing my best not to get this too complex for you, so stay with me. Did you hear what I said? So your job then is to determine, okay, is the drug treatment this person's under merely masking the symptoms of a demon, or is it actually treating the biochemical issue physiologically related to the genuine suffering of the person? Okay. So if drugs are involved, that is a clue that it may not be as demonic. Now, there are a couple of other possibilities. There may be some psychosis going on. All right? The other possibility is it's a misdiagnosis. And it's actually DID, or dissociative identity disorder, or as we used to call it, MPD. I get a lot of people that poorly trained clinicians or clinicians who just are not familiar diagnostically with DID and MPD have called it schizophrenia when it's not. And you need to understand the therapeutic community is not up to speed on DID and MPD. The majority of clinicians don't know how to handle this, don't know how to treat it, and many of them don't even believe it. So you're up against a serious prejudice in both the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association. They don't handle this. They don't know how to deal with this. And you know what? They don't want to deal with this because it's too time intensive and it doesn't produce, I need to say this, the right kind of cash flow. Now, I'm not putting down, as I've said clearly, mental health professions and good, caring people. But not everybody is good and caring. Just as not everybody in the ministry is in it for the right motives, right? Some people in the mental health professions are not there for good motives. So, they've made a lousy, lazy diagnosis, and the person is actually dissociative. And the different mental states are the result of different personality alters who are out. And some of those personality alters may have insanity. So the person's flipping around back and forth. They're not schizophrenic. They're dissociative. Now, while we're at it, and we're going to spend more time on this tomorrow, let's talk about the other possibility. The person is not schizophrenic, but they have DID or MPD. Now, because we're going to spend more time on this tomorrow, and I will be happy to entertain any questions, and because we have a 2-hour video training series that you can get right over there. How many of you have our Demons of Dissociation series? Wonderful. I'd say almost half of you have it. Good. You really need that, because that gets you up to speed on this. However, to explain how this can be misdiagnosed as mental illness is what we're trying to look at today. So there are a couple of ways that DID and MPD gets misdiagnosed. First of all, you have an insane alter. One of the alters is crazy. The rest of the system is fine. But that alter truly has mental illness because of the trauma. The whole system isn't mentally ill, just that alter. And when that alter's out, the person gets misdiagnosed because the clinician doesn't understand DID and MPD, and so it says, oh, this person's schizophrenic, or they're this, or they're that. It's not that, it's an insane alter. All right? And sometimes just the fact that there are separate realities causes a misdiagnosis. If you don't understand MPD and you get somebody who's bouncing around all over the place and you're a clinician looking at that, what else are you going to conclude? And some of you people on the teams know what I'm talking about. You've seen folks who can just switch like this back and forth. I mean, boom, 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 boom. They're one person, they're another person, they're another person, they're another person, they're another person. And they're all over the map. And believe me, we've seen some people, you've worked with some of them, I know, Donna. I mean, they can switch instantly in a microsecond. And they go through, 20, 30, 40 personalities in a matter of minutes. Different voices, different sounds, different elocutions, different languages, totally different personality makeups. Well, if you don't understand MPD, and you're a clinician, you're just going to say, this person's crazy, this person's nuts. I have got to lock them away before they hurt somebody. All right? Another thing that happens is when they run into instances of self-abuse. Self-abuse gets misdiagnosed. If you don't understand the psychological dynamics of cutting, of self-torture, and clinicians are starting to understand that, but still a lot of them don't get it. That the person doesn't need drugs necessarily. They don't necessarily need institutionalization if they're trying to cut and injure themselves. Because the whole system is not dysfunctional. See, this is the part they're missing. If you understand DID, you know the whole person doesn't want to cut. The whole person doesn't want to self-destruct. Just someone inside. They may have 20 personalities. Only one wants to do this. Or only one is insane. And we know you work with that one. You bring healing and Christ into the life of that, and they quit cutting, and they're no longer insane, and then the system doesn't appear to be erratic and aberrational anymore. Make sense? Okay. So those are some of the things that we find with dissociation. I'll be happy to answer a lot more questions about dissociation, but I want to move on here. So just jot your notes in the margin, because I want to make sure that we get through the bulk and the body of the teaching here. The other issue is bipolar. Used to call it manic depressive. Slight difference, but it's essentially the same diagnosis. They're up and they're down. Sometimes those mood swings, as we sometimes used to refer to them, can be very gentle over a period of time. They're in and out, and sometimes it's like this, and you never know who you're going to wake up next to in the morning. Being married to someone who's bipolar is a real challenge. You never know who's going to come walking through the door. They could be here, they could be here. They're flipping around all over the place. Now here's what I've discovered. When it's demonization, you have on one side over here the manic, over here the depressive, and sometimes this is a demon. Sometimes this is a demon. And so sometimes the demon is tugging them this way. Sometimes the demon is tugging them this way. And here's where it gets complicated. Sometimes one aspect is truly biochemical. The other aspect is demonic. Sometimes both are demonic. Sometimes neither are demonic. Are you with me on that? Sometimes both are biochemical. Sometimes both are demonic. You have a demon of depression. You have a demon of anger or rage. And they're flipping back and forth between the two. And there now is some indication, a lot of scientific study being done in terms of neurobiology and neurochemistry in regards to how that rage is actually part of the person's chemical makeup. Now, I think that's probably legitimate. However, I think that chemical imbalance was probably caused by trauma in the first place, and it's the trauma they're not dealing with. They're just looking for the pharmaceutical companies to make a lot more money. But that's another whole issue, okay? So, the demon yanks them back and forth. Let's take an example. You have a demon of depression. But you genuinely have a chemical problem that makes you manic. So you're manic over here, and the demon says, my turn. He kicks in, yanks you over here. You've gone all the way from like this to like this. This is a demon. The other's biochemical. You cast this out, you still got a manic problem to deal with, but then the person can get legitimate help. Then you can say, now, counselor, you step in. We do what Jesus did, have done our job. We brought healing to the depression. Now we want you to help the person deal with their manic issues. Then you send them to the psychiatrist. See, that's why we want to be friends with the mental health professions, because we have something to contribute that they can't deal with. Or it can be the other way around. Sometimes this is a demon of rage, of anger, of murder. The person is off the charts. They're ready to kill somebody. And then biochemical depression sets in. And boom, they're over here. Now, while we're talking about depression, let's touch on that for a moment. You can see we could do a whole institute on this subject. And in the future, I will. I'm doing one session on it. And I'm getting frustrated because I can't get everything in I want to get in. But we're going to get enough in today because we have other issues we want to move on to. All right. So depression. Now, what's the difference between that which is genuinely clinical and that which is spiritual? Well, that which is clinical is related to your body. Your body's doing strange things. Your chemistry, your hormones, something is not functioning. Your thyroid's out of whack. Whatever the case is, something's going on. Glandular, hormonal, and it's causing you to sink into depression. Should you immediately run for the bottle of Prozac? Again, I'm not a clinician. Certainly you should seek competent clinical advice. I would encourage you, however, not to swallow everything they want to push down your gullet, okay? Because the next thing you know, you're going to be drug dependent, and you're going to be so whacked out, you will become so controlled by the chemicals that when somebody tries to minister spiritual healing to you, and this is where you need a miracle from God, okay, that they're not going to be able to. And some of my team members, you probably have run into these people. You can't do anything for them. You want to minister deliverance, they're so whacked out on the drugs, you can't get to them. You know what I'm talking about? So, I can understand prescriptively there may be something for a time that you need, but try to avoid getting so strongly dependent on it that the Lord can't get through, that healing can't get through to the part of you that genuinely needs some remediation. Now, the spiritual depression, that's something totally different. And that has a root cause. And that root, which is way down deep, generally is involved in abuse, trauma, something horrible has happened to you. And the depression is merely this stuff here, which is not getting resolved, which you're stuck in, and often dissociatively stuck in, because an altar down inside has got all this stuff, and this is just a symptom up here. You're not depressed. You have a trauma issue, an abuse issue. And often, guess what is perpetuating that? A demon is exacerbating that, irritating it, constantly stirring this up. And every time that demon gets this stuff stirred up, guess what? You go into depression. You don't have clinical depression, you have spiritual depression. You need healing. Somebody needs to get down to the root issue. And this is the part where I get frustrated and upset. This is where those lazy clinicians come into the picture. They don't want to take the time to work with you, to push you, to probe you. They want to sit back, like you talk, collect the check, and walk out the door. You got to push people to get to here, don't you? Come on, team members, don't you? You got to work with them. You got to probe them. You got to get them into those issues we talked about yesterday, into the shame, out of the shame, down where the secrets are. Almost always, this is related to a secret. Look, when someone is depressed spiritually, there's something down there that you haven't found yet. Something nobody knows. It may be hidden in an altar. It may be amnesically masked. But down there is where the problem is. You need to find the secret. Or the legal right. The secret's the legal right. What is the legal right that's keeping this stuff boiling down here? And that's what deliverance is, isn't it? Amen? We are doing what the clinician won't do. We're pushing, we're probing, we're poking, we're going after this. We're not giving up. Talk to me about this. Express your feelings about this. Who did what to you? I divide soul and spirit. I want to talk to that part of you that holds the secret, that knows what nobody else knows, that's got the key down there. I want that part to come forward. I want to know. And then you push and push until somebody says, well, What she or he doesn't know is that, Grandpa incested her in the crib or whatever. And then, no wonder this person's depressed. All that junk is down there. All right? Guidelines. These are some of the things that you want to be very careful for. I've already talked about this. Respect for mental health. Respect mental health professionals, respect their diagnosis, respect their intervention, respect their medication. You may believe they've made a bad diagnosis. You may even believe the person is over-medicated, but be careful about intruding into an area where you don't have the knowledge, the expertise, or you may get into legal quicksand. Just don't do it. And this is where you really can be led by the Holy Spirit. God can show you how to have wisdom, to get into areas where you know you need to get, but you're not violating some professional protocol. That's the main thing. Healing must precede intervention when you've got mental illness. You've got true mental illness. When someone is schizophrenic and comes to me, and I have determined that they are truly mentally ill. Now, I may suspect there's some demonization. Remember the 5 possibilities? I suspect demons are operating there somewhere, but I'm not going after those demons. What do I pray for? Exorcism? No. I pray for healing. I ask God to heal their mind, and I ask the family to continue to trust God for a physical healing that will manifest itself on an emotional level. And then I say, as the person recovers, sometimes the medication will help them. Sometimes the medication will bring them back to reality, and then you can deal with them. The obvious illustration is something we've all experienced, and that is trying to share the gospel with a drunk. Been there, done that? You tell them, go home, get sober, come back, we'll give you the Romans road. But when you're drunk, you can't lead someone to Christ when they're drunk or high on drugs. You ever have experience? I have it trying to. You guys probably run into this in your home, haven't you, Bill? Trying to get somebody who's drunk or on drugs or whacked out and trying to share Christ with them, you can't do it. You've got to get them in some kind of rehab, get them sober, get them where they can understand. So you can't minister deliverance to somebody until there's some healing that takes place. And of course, the third thing is finally deal with the demonic. But deal with the demonic after everything else has been taken care of. One more thing I want to share with you. Lord spoke to my heart about this on the way over here. It's not in your outline, but it's something that I think I just need to kind of throw in as a bonus today. It's not, as I say, something that was part of what I was really going to teach you, and it's just simple. But when you're ministering to people who are mentally ill, as well as people who are physically ill, you need to understand what a miracle is. All right? There are 3 stages to miracles. 3 kinds of miracles. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard this taught before. Probably haven't. You probably just think a miracle is a miracle, a miracle. It's not. All right? There are miracles of what I call recreation. Can somebody jump in and tell me what you think would be a biblical example of a miracle of recreation? Something out of nothing, yes?
Man with the withered hand?
No. It's close, though. That's actually a different stage, yes.
Growing a bone where there was no bone, or growing a leg where there was no leg.
No, but you're close. It's pretty obvious. You'll kick yourself. You go, oh, I should have thought of that. Loaves and fishes. The multiplication of the loaves and fishes. It was ex nihilo is the term for it, or out of nothing. That's the theological concept. It is speaking into existence that which is not. It is a reality which did not exist before in any way, shape, or form, and out of nothing. It is what the Logos does. It is how the worlds came into being. That's a first stage miracle. Sometimes when you're ministering healing, we're talking about mental illness, the person needs a first stage miracle. They absolutely need God to do something that isn't there. God needs to create new brain cells out of nothing. And God can do it. Amen? He can do it. And sometimes God will lead you by faith to declare that kind of first stage miracle. And put the brain back in a condition it wasn't in before because neurological tissue was destroyed through something. Maybe the person had an accident of some kind, some injury, and as a result of the injury became mentally ill. They need a first stage miracle. All right, the second stage miracle is what I call a reconstruction. Now, this is what you were getting into, man, like the healing of the paralytic. God didn't create something that wasn't there, or the withered hand. There was already something there. God just reconstructed it. That's the third stage miracle. What's a rearrangement? Well, a rearrangement is God taking the natural processes. I could ask you for examples, but I'm not sure. You're a little bit gun shy at this point. What would that be?
Well, like in schizophrenia, the brain cells, I've seen pictures where there'll be a different pattern of your brain cells on part of your brain, and so to me, the enemy must just touch here or there. But you can see so plainly how the brain cells are arranged in different patterns.
Very good. Biblical example. Where is a miracle of rearrangement in the Bible where God used a perfectly natural process? Jesus did. Used a perfectly natural process to bring about the healing of something. It wasn't multiplying loaves and fishes. Got an idea?
Jesus took the clay and put on the man's eye.
Excellent. She wins the prize. We don't know what the prize is, but she won it. Okay. Perfect example. Remember, I see men as trees walking, and Jesus spit in the clay, and he did it again. There was a gradual process. We don't know what happened, but there must have been something in that clay. There was some chemical. There was something going on there that Jesus was applying a form of gradual, natural healing. Whether it was something in the saliva, something in the clay, the chemical combination of the two, it caused an effect on the man's eyes. So sometimes, and this is where psychiatry, psychology, mental health services can play a role in the rearrangement of the person's thought processes through using the natural things that God has provided with human wisdom. You see why I felt the Lord spoke to me about this morning, how important this is to understand? So when the issue is mental illness, you have to think of, and the Lord may use a combination of all of these. What am I really to seek God for here? Well, sometimes it may be all three. Sometimes you may say, continue to see your clinician. You may need to stay on your medication. All these things may help to rearrange the synapses in the brain, get everything firing back the way it's supposed to be firing. And it may be that God will just, kind of take what's there and reconstruct it, rebuild it. Part of the brain may just be dead or dormant or damaged and non-functional. And God will restore that part of the brain tissue. Or God may just step in and give you, or that person, a whole new mind. Brain tissue may be destroyed. God may just say, I'll do a miracle. But you know what I think God often does for us? He works in all three areas. And the danger of the Christian community is that we make God so one-dimensional. Isn't that true? And we have these naive expectations of what God should or should not do, and we put God in a box and we just say, well, I'm going to believe God for this. And God may say, no, I've got a combination of things here. I've gifted man with human wisdom and understanding. I need you to let that play a role in this. Or I'm going to heal this person over time. I'm going to gradually reconstruct them. I don't want to do a total miracle because I want to give you the privilege of being involved in that person's life and helping to restore their mental health. And I'm going to let you love them back to sanity. Love them back to reality. I need to use you as a vessel. Here, he's using the therapeutic community. Here he's using you. Here he steps in, he says, I'm going to do it. And we in the Christian community, we always want God to do this one. Right? I won't do my Southern evangelist imitation again, but, that's what we want him to do. Right now in the name of Jesus. Why do you take so long, Bob? Why do you do what Jesus people? We can do it a lot quicker. Fine. Go ahead, take our caseload. But this is the way we're going to do it. I'm teaching the do what Jesus did people, and those of you who want to go out and minister and understand how to heal people, the fact that we need to be open to the Holy Spirit for however the Lord wants to move. You say amen?
The International School of Exorcism, an online Bible college of spiritual warfare. The history of exorcism, healing, deliverance, and spiritual warfare. And the practical aspects of breaking curses, pulling down spiritual strongholds, and removing the legal rights of Satan. Set yourself, your friends, and family free by enrolling in the International School of Exorcism. In our new book, Set Your Family Free, we teach how to raise children with purity principles, how to prepare them for adulthood, and how to break every assignment of Satan over their lives.
We give you the principles of spiritual warfare to fight for your family and to be victorious over the powers of darkness.
This is the book that will set your family free. How do you know if your problems are the result of bad life choices or demons? My 200-page book, Dealing with Demons, has answers for questions most are afraid to ask. Can Christians be demon-possessed? How can I know what's natural and what's supernatural? Dealing with Demons will teach you how to recognize symptoms that the devil is at work in your life. Be one step closer to living in spiritual victory. The most frequent demon that I deal with is the spirit of Jezebel. This demon wants to destroy your health, your finances, your marriage, your family, and your church. My book, Jezebel, is your key to overcoming the most prevalent evil spirit of our age. Get your copy today.
He took the curses away from me. See Bob Larson, because he can help you.
If your life isn't all that it should be, if relationships aren't working, if your health, your finances, or your spiritual life are unhappy, schedule a personal one-on-one encounter with me. We'll get to the root of the issues that are holding you back. We'll give you answers and a whole new direction in life.
Oh, what a change, what a difference when you have an encounter with God.
Take action. I look forward to seeing you soon.
We encourage your support for this worldwide outreach to do what Jesus did. For the latest information on resources, seminars, conferences, training institutes, retreats, and international missions, go to boblarson.org. Thank you for your prayers and financial partnership.